How dare you bring a man into my house? Daniel's hand connected with his wife's face with a sickening crack. Grace held her cheek, silent, while his mistress smirked behind him. But the shirtless man on the couch slowly stood up, and what he said next made Daniel's blood run cold. You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our dramatic stories. And to my loyal family who've been rocking with us, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. The black BMW pulled into the driveway at exactly 3 in the afternoon, music pumping from the speakers, laughter spilling out before the doors even opened. Daniel stepped out of the driver's seat, his skin tanned from 2 weeks under the Caribbean sun. Designer sunglasses perched on his head, looking like a man without a care in the world. From the passenger side emerged Bianca, his mistress of 2 years, in a tight sundress that left nothing to the imagination, her highlighted hair cascading over her shoulders, shopping bags from every luxury store imaginable dangling from her arms. "Baby, I still can't believe you bought me that Chanel bag!" Bianca squealed, throwing her arms around Daniel's neck right there in the driveway, kissing him with the kind of passion usually reserved for newlyweds, not adulterers. Daniel grinned, his hands sliding possessively down her back. "Nothing's too good for you, Bianca. You deserve the world." They didn't bother lowering their voices, didn't bother hiding. Why should they? Daniel had made his choice, and he wanted the whole neighborhood to know it. Let Grace see. Let her finally understand that he'd upgraded, moved on to someone younger, more exciting, more appreciative of everything he provided. He grabbed their luggage, expensive matching sets he'd charged to a credit card he didn't realize was connected to accounts he didn't actually own, and headed toward the front door with Bianca giggling beside him, recounting their vacation adventures loud enough for anyone within earshot to hear. The door was unlocked. That was the first sign something was different, though Daniel was too caught up in his own arrogance to notice. He pushed it open, already planning how he'd pack Grace's things and send her to stay with whatever family member would take her pathetic, abandoned self. Then he saw him. A man sat on the living room couch, Daniel's couch, in Daniel's house, in Daniel's kingdom, and he was shirtless. Not just any shirtless. This man was built like someone who had a personal trainer, a private chef, and all the time in the world to perfect his physique. His dark skin gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through the windows, every muscle defined like he'd been carved from stone. He wore expensive-looking black slacks, and on his wrist was a watch that caught the light, gold and complicated, the kind of timepiece Daniel had only seen in magazines he couldn't afford. The man sat with one leg crossed over the other, completely relaxed, scrolling through his phone as if he owned the place. A half-empty glass of what looked like expensive whiskey sat on the coffee table beside him. Daniel's whiskey, from the bottle he'd been saving for special occasions. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, his brain struggling to process the scene. Then, rage, hot, pure, and overwhelming, flooded through his veins. "Who the hell are you?" Daniel's voice exploded through the house, dropping the luggage with a crash. "Grace! Grace! Get out here now!" The man on the couch didn't even flinch. He looked up slowly, his dark eyes cold and assessing, taking in Daniel and Bianca with an expression that somehow managed to be both bored and contemptuous. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Grace appeared in the doorway, wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt, her natural hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked tired, older than her 32 years, the weight of 1,000 disappointments etched into the slight lines around her eyes. She saw Daniel. She saw Bianca. She saw the vacation tans, the shopping bags, the evidence of the life they'd been living while she'd been here, alone, enduring another round of public humiliation. Her eyes flickered to the man on the couch, something passing between them, a look Daniel couldn't quite read, but that made his rage burn hotter. "Grace." Daniel's voice was dangerously low as he stalked toward her. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Who is that man?" Grace opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say a word, Daniel's hand shot out. The slap echoed through the house like a gunshot. Grace's head snapped to the side, her hand flying up to her reddening cheek. The shock of it froze everyone in place, everyone except Bianca, who gasped dramatically, and the man on the couch, whose entire body went rigid, his relaxed posture transforming into something predatory. "How dare you bring a man into my house?" Daniel shouted, his face inches from Grace's. "Into the home I provide. Have you lost your mind? Have you no shame?" Grace slowly lowered her hand from her face. She looked at Daniel, really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Then her gaze shifted to Bianca, who stood in the doorway, still clutching her shopping bags, her expression caught between vindictive satisfaction and nervous uncertainty. Grace said nothing. No tears, no explanations, no begging. She simply turned, walked past both of them with her head held high, and disappeared into the bedroom. The door closed behind her with a soft final click. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel turned back to the shirtless man, his chest heaving with righteous indignation. "I don't know who you think you are, but you have exactly 10 seconds to get out of my house before I—" "Your house?" The man's voice cut through Daniel's threat like a blade through butter. He stood slowly, unfolding to his full height, at least 6'3", towering over Daniel's 5'9". The man took a step forward, and Daniel instinctively took a step back. The words were spoken softly, yet they landed with such force that the air itself seemed to grow colder by 10 degrees. Bianca's voice trembled from behind Daniel. "Daniel, that watch he's wearing." "What?" Daniel snapped, never breaking eye contact with the man standing before him. "That's a Patek Philippe Grand Complication," Bianca whispered, panic seeping into every syllable. "My ex was obsessed with watches. That one, Daniel, that's more than $500,000 on his wrist." Daniel's stomach twisted. He looked again, really looked. The watch, the impeccably tailored trousers, the calm assurance that didn't come from bravado, but from absolute, unquestioned power. "Who are you?" Daniel asked again, the rage gone now, replaced by the first icy grip of fear. The man smiled. There was no warmth in it. "I'm the man who's about to dismantle your entire existence," he said evenly. "And you earned every moment of it." He stepped closer. Daniel instinctively retreated until the backs of his legs struck the armchair behind him. Bianca had shrunk into the corner near the door, clearly wishing she could disappear. "Sit," the man ordered. Daniel obeyed. He loathed himself for it, but his body complied before his pride could protest. The man remained standing, looking down at him with a cold fury that made Daniel's earlier anger feel laughable. "My name is Julian Gideon," he said, letting the name settle heavily in the room. Daniel went pale. The Gideon Group. Everyone knew that name, one of West Africa's most powerful real estate empires, spanning 3 continents, worth billions. "I'm Grace's brother," Julian continued, his tone glacial. "Her older brother, the one who warned her not to marry you 7 years ago, the one who watched you erode her spirit, piece by piece, the one she finally called 2 weeks ago when she couldn't endure it anymore. 2 weeks ago." While Daniel had been lounging on a beach with Bianca, posting photos meant to wound his wife, Grace had been here, broken enough to reach out to her family. "Grace is a Gideon," Julian said, pacing slowly like a predator. "Our father is Richard Gideon. Our grandfather built an empire. Grace was raised in a 12-bedroom mansion with 4 pools and a staff of 30. She attended private schools in Switzerland. She had a trust fund large enough to last 10 lifetimes. Daniel felt nauseous. It couldn't be real. Grace had always seemed so ordinary, so quiet, so small. But Grace, Julian went on, his voice softening just slightly at her name, was the romantic, the dreamer. She met you at a charity event. You were serving tables, trying to ingratiate yourself with people above you, and she believed she saw potential. Decency, something worth loving. He stopped pacing and fixed Daniel with a direct stare. "She begged our father to let her marry you, said she didn't want money to define her marriage. She wanted something honest. So our father agreed on one condition. He would protect her, quietly." The realization hit Daniel piece by piece, each more devastating than the last. "The house you think is yours?" Julian gestured around the room. "Purchased by my family. Registered in her name. The business loan you got 7 years ago, that came from a Gideon subsidiary. You've lived off our money your entire marriage, you ungrateful leech." "No," Daniel whispered. "I built my business. I worked." "You worked with capital we provided," Julian cut in. "And Grace has been working remotely for our company this entire time. Senior level. Six-figure salary. She poured it all into supporting you and your fragile ego. Bianca made a small sound from the corner. Daniel had almost forgotten she was there. Grace called me 2 weeks ago, Julian said, pulling out his phone. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She told me about your affair, about how you stopped even pretending to respect her, about the vacation you planned with your mistress, funded by her money, and how you didn't even bother to hide it. His jaw tightened, rage barely contained. I flew in that night. I've been here ever since, watching my sister try to survive while you were off playing pretend with your downgrade. He flicked a dismissive glance at Bianca, who looked like she might collapse. Daniel's phone rang. The sound cut sharply through the tension. He glanced at the screen. Marcus, his business partner. Answer it, Julian said. Speaker. Daniel's hands shook as he complied. Daniel, what is happening? Marcus shouted. The bank just called in our loan, $500,000 due in 48 hours or they seize everything. Did you know about this? Daniel couldn't answer. And that's not all, Marcus continued frantically. We were just served papers. Apparently, we don't even own the company. Gideon Holdings owns 78%. We're minority shareholders in our own firm. What did you do, Daniel? Julian reached out and ended the call. That was the first, he said calmly. More are coming. The phone rang again. His lawyer, then his bank, then his insurance provider. Each call delivered another blow. Frozen accounts, defaulted loans, eviction notices, canceled credit cards. His entire financial life was disintegrating before his eyes. Bianca began to cry quietly, finally realizing she'd attached herself to a sinking wreck. Julian made a call of his own. Father, it's time. Yes, proceed with everything. He ended the call and smiled, a smile devoid of mercy. In 30 minutes, Julian said, everything you believe defines you will be gone, and you will sit here and watch. The bedroom door opened. Grace stepped out. Daniel barely recognized her. She wore a tailored navy dress and heels. Her hair flowed freely, styled with care. Makeup highlighted her features. But it wasn't the appearance that stunned him. It was her posture. She stood taller, stronger, like someone reclaiming herself. Behind her, 3 sharply dressed individuals entered through the front door, briefcases bearing the gold-embossed Gideon Group logo. Grace passed Daniel without a glance and stood beside her brother. Hello, Daniel, she said calmly. We need to talk. Now. One of the lawyers spread documents across the dining table. Words leapt out at Daniel. Divorce, eviction, asset seizure. Julian draped a protective arm around his sister. You wanted to parade your mistress through my sister's home? He said quietly. Humiliate her? Strike her under her own roof? He leaned in, voice deadly low. This is what happens when you disrespect a Gideon woman. The lead attorney, a silver-haired woman with razor-sharp eyes, adjusted her glasses. Her nameplate read Victoria Chen, senior partner, Chen & Associates. Mr. Thompson, she said coolly, there are several legal matters to address. Daniel remained frozen, watching his life be reduced to paperwork. Bianca stood silent against the wall, stripped of all confidence. First, the property, Victoria said, sliding a document toward him. This residence at 247 Maple Ridge Drive is solely owned by Grace Gideon Thompson. The deed, mortgage, and title list, only her. You are recorded merely as a resident spouse. That's impossible, Daniel rasped. I've been paying the mortgage. You've been depositing funds into an account managed by Mrs. Gideon Thompson, Victoria corrected. An account funded primarily by her salary from Gideon Holdings, where she has served as a senior financial consultant for 7 years, earning approximately $250,000 annually. The number crushed him. Second, Victoria continued. Your company, Thompson & Associates Construction, received an initial $500,000 investment from Meridian Capital Group, a Gideon Holdings subsidiary. The agreement granted Gideon Holdings 78% ownership in exchange for capital and continued support. I never signed anything like that, Daniel protested weakly. Victoria slid another document across the table. Your signature, Mr. Thompson. Page 14, paragraph 7. According to my client's testimony, you signed without reading because you were too eager to get the money. Grace finally spoke, her tone quiet but unyielding. It was in my father's office. I was there. You were desperate. I told you to read it, and you said, baby, I trust you. Let's just get this done. Daniel's memory flickered. He remembered the massive office, the intimidating suits, the crushing need to leave with the check. He had wanted out as fast as possible. "The loan is being called," Victoria continued. "You have 48 hours to repay the full amount plus interest, $573,000, or Gideon Holdings will seize all company assets and dissolve Thompson and Associates." "I don't have that kind of money." Daniel's voice broke. "We know," Julian said coolly. "That's the point." Victoria moved on. "Your vehicles, the BMW you drove today and the Mercedes in the garage, are registered to Grace Gideon Thompson, purchased with her funds and titled in her name." Daniel thought of the BMW outside, the pride he'd felt driving it with Bianca beside him. It was never his. "The credit cards you've been using," Victoria went on, her voice edged with contempt, "including those used to fund your vacation with Miss Bianca Stevens, all linked to accounts in your wife's name. $47,000 charged in 2 weeks. Bianca gasped. 47,000? First-class flights, luxury resort, designer purchases, jewelry, spa services, Victoria recited, all charged while you publicly flaunted your affair. "You said you were paying," Bianca shrieked. "You said you had money." "Shut up, Bianca," Daniel snapped, then turned to Grace. "Grace, please, we can fix this. We're married. We took vows." "Vows you broke," Grace cut in. "Every lie, every touch, every time you made me feel small in my own home." "I made mistakes, but this is cruel." Daniel gestured at the papers. "You lied to me for 7 years. Julian stepped forward, fast enough to make Daniel flinch. She didn't lie. She simply didn't advertise her family's wealth. She wanted to be loved for who she was, and you took everything and discarded her. Victoria cleared her throat. "You are being served divorce papers citing adultery, emotional abuse, and irreconcilable differences. You are also being served an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate. Additionally, a restraining order requires you to remain 500 feet away from Mrs. Gideon Thompson." 24 hours, Daniel whispered. "Where do I go?" "Not our problem," Julian said. "You should have thought of that before bringing your mistress into my sister's home, before you struck her." Daniel's phone buzzed. "We're done. Filing bankruptcy. You destroyed everything." Another message. "Eviction filed. 48 hours. Another. "Just heard what you did. Don't contact me again." Everything collapsed at once, right there in a living room that had never belonged to him. Bianca pushed off the wall. "I'm leaving. Don't call me. We're done." "Bianca, wait." Daniel tried to rise. "Sit," Julian ordered. Daniel froze. Bianca grabbed her purse, paid for with Grace's money, and went to the door. She turned back once. "You're pathetic," she said. "You made me think you were someone. You're nothing." The door slammed. Silence swallowed the room. Daniel sat broken, papers surrounding him, his life erased. Grace stood beside her brother and felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, only relief. "Sign," she said softly. "It's over." "Grace, please." Daniel sobbed. 24 hours, Julian warned. "Test me." Grace went to the window, looking out at the quiet street where she had spent 7 years shrinking herself, the house she maintained, the life she tried to save. She turned back. "I need you to understand something," she said calmly. "Not for you, for me." She stepped closer. 7 years ago, we met at the Westbridge Charity Gala. My father's company sponsored it. I was there representing the Gideon family. You were serving champagne, hoping for an opportunity. She smiled faintly. "You didn't know who I was. You spoke to me like a person. You asked about my dreams. You made me laugh." Julian shifted, remembering his warnings. "I fell in love with that man," Grace said. "The one who talked about building affordable housing, who seemed kind." "I loved you," Daniel whispered. "No," Grace replied firmly. "You loved what I gave you, not me." She began to pace. "When you proposed, my father investigated you. Failed businesses. Debt. They begged me not to marry you, but I believed love was enough." Her voice tightened. "So I promised to protect myself financially. I worked remotely, hid my real salary. When you needed money, my family provided it, without your knowing. The house, the cars, everything," she continued. "I paid for it all. I never made you feel small. I let you believe you were the provider." She stopped in front of him. "I watched you change. You became cold, dismissive. You treated me like furniture, and I told myself it would pass." Her voice hardened. 6 months ago, I found out about Bianca. I saw the messages, the way you spoke about me, how you couldn't wait to replace me." Daniel recoiled. "I cried for 3 days," Grace said. "Then I called Julian, and he said, I've been waiting 7 years. Say the word. She met Daniel's eyes. And this is me saying it. Julian gave a short nod, his jaw rigid with contained fury. But I didn't come home right away, Grace went on. I needed certainty. I needed to know whether there was anything left to salvage. So Julian stayed here with me. He watched you himself. He was in the home gym when you walked in today, the gym I paid for that you never touched in a house that was never yours. She stepped beside her brother, and the resemblance between them became unmistakable. The same proud posture, the same ironclad confidence, the unmistakable mark of the Gideon bloodline. You walked in with your mistress, Daniel, into my house, openly displaying your betrayal. And when you saw my brother, a stranger to you, standing in a house you believed belonged to you, your first reaction was violence. Grace brushed her fingers over her cheek, where the slap still burned back, and Julian's hands curled into fists. You hit me, Grace said softly, in front of my brother, in my own home, while your mistress watched. That was the moment any possibility of mercy ended. She lifted the divorce papers from the table and extended them toward Daniel. Sign them, she said, now. Or I will personally ensure that every business associate, every friend, every person who ever respected you learns exactly who you are. I have 7 years of proof, Daniel. Messages, emails, financial records showing your theft from our accounts, and I have videos. Videos? Daniel whispered. Security footage, Julian said calmly. The cameras you never noticed because you never cared about this house. We have recordings of you and Bianca in every room, recordings of how you spoke about Grace. Everything is dated and legally usable. Daniel reached for the documents, his hands trembling. If I sign, what happens to me? That's no longer my problem. Grace replied, You have 24 hours to pack your personal belongings, only what you paid for yourself, which won't be much. Then you leave. You will never contact me again. Where am I supposed to go? Figure it out, Julian said flatly, the same way my sister would have had to if you'd succeeded in discarding her. Daniel hesitated, pen hovering. I'm sorry, he murmured. Grace studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, there was no anger left, only clarity. I know. You're sorry you were caught. Sorry you lost access to my money. Sorry your comfortable life is over. But you're not sorry for what you did to me. You're not sorry for the disrespect, the betrayal, the years you took. She lowered herself so their eyes were level. But I'm not sorry anymore, Daniel. I'm free. He signed. The next 24 hours crawled by like a sentence being carried out. Daniel slept in the guest room, the one Grace had furnished, on a bed she'd bought, wrapped in sheets she'd chosen. Everything around him reminded him that none of it had ever belonged to him. He tried to pack, but each item stopped him. Grace paid for this. Grace bought that. His wardrobe, mostly purchased with her cards. His laptop, a Christmas gift from her. His watches, every one a present from the woman he betrayed. In the end, he filled 2 suitcases, clothes, and a handful of things he could honestly claim. 7 years reduced to 2 bags. Grace spent the night at a hotel at Julian's insistence. I won't have you under the same roof as him another second, he'd said. The lawyers stayed until every signature was placed, witnessed, notarized. Final. Morning light crept through the windows as Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. Bianca had blocked him everywhere. His business partner sent one last message. The company's finished. Bankruptcy filed. Thanks for destroying my life, too. His parents had called after seeing the vacation photos. His mother cried. His father called him a disgrace. Neither would take him in. We raised you better than this, his father said before hanging up. A knock startled him. Time, Julian said from the hall. I'm coming in. Julian entered, composed and immaculate, dressed in clothes worth more than Daniel owned. 2 security guards followed. They'll escort you out, Julian said. Your bags? Daniel pointed to the suitcases. That's it? Julian asked. 7 years and this is all you own? The shame was suffocating. One guard picked up the bags, the other waited. I need to talk to Grace, Daniel pleaded. 5 minutes. The restraining order is active, Julian cut in. 500 feet. You cross it, you're arrested. Understand? Daniel nodded. They descended the stairs. The house, his former illusion of power, passed by in silence. Furniture, screens, rooms he'd claimed without earning. At the door, Julian stopped him. You should understand something, he said quietly. Grace loved you. She gave you years of her life. She made herself smaller so you could feel larger, and you threw it away, for ego, for comfort. Daniel's eyes burned. My sister is worth 100 of you, Julian continued. She didn't need you. She chose you, and you were too insecure to value that. He opened the door to a gray morning. You'll live knowing you had a queen and traded her for nothing. Julian said, that's the punishment. Not the money, not the house, the knowledge that you'll never have someone like her again, and even if you did, you'd ruin it. The guards escorted Daniel to the curb. His bags were set beside a waiting taxi, paid for by Grace's assistant. As the car pulled away, Daniel looked back once. Julian stood in the doorway, already on the phone. The house vanished from sight, taking the last 7 years with it. 3 weeks later, Daniel lived in a cramped studio 40 miles away, working retail shifts. His business was dissolved, his reputation destroyed. Friends avoided him. Bianca had moved on to someone wealthier. A news alert lit his phone. Grace Gideon, named VP of Gideon Holdings, rising star returns to family empire. His hands shook as he opened it. Grace stood before a towering glass building, radiant in a power suit, free. The article detailed her lineage, daughter of billionaire Richard Gideon, educated in Switzerland, MBA from Harvard, 7 years spent working independently before returning. It highlighted her focus on affordable housing and women's empowerment. Daniel wasn't mentioned. Another photo showed the Gideon estate. Vast grounds, gates, fountains, guarded privacy. This was the world she'd left for him. The interior photos followed. Marble, art, space beyond imagination. Grace had given this up for a man who never saw her worth. A text arrived from an unknown number. This is Patricia Chen, executive assistant to Mrs. Gideon. All legal matters are resolved. Mrs. Gideon requests you respect the restraining order. Any contact will result in legal action. Move forward with your life, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Gideon wishes you well. Even now, she showed restraint. Daniel looked around his apartment, bare, borrowed, empty. This was the result of his choices. Another alert followed. Gideon Holdings commits $50 million to women's empowerment centers. Grace announced sums there as Daniel couldn't fathom while he worried about groceries. He stared into the mirror. Without her, he was smaller, exposed. Julian had been right. The loss wasn't material. It was knowing what he destroyed. Grace was rising. Daniel was alone. 6 months after the divorce, Grace stood on the balcony of the Gideon estate, 50 acres of guarded serenity. With the morning sun bathed everything in gold. For the first time in years, she breathed freely. Grace? Her father stepped out with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you'd want this before the board meeting. Thanks, Dad. They stood together. I'm proud of you, Richard said. For how you handled it with dignity. I was stupid, Grace said. No, he replied gently. You were brave. Julian appeared, flawless as ever. Family meeting without me? Grace smirked as bat. We were discussing your desire to run over my ex. I had a plan, Julian said seriously. Julian, Richard warned. Grace smiled. This was what she'd left. This was home. The meeting's in an hour, Julian said. Ready? Grace straightened. Executive. Gideon, I'm ready. The board convened at Gideon Holdings headquarters, a glass and steel tower dominating the business district. Grace entered the boardroom in a tailored navy suit, her natural hair styled with precision, her confidence immediately shifting the room's energy. 15 board members, heirs to legacy fortunes, self-made visionaries, architects of vast enterprises, rose to their feet as she arrived. This was no longer unfamiliar territory. This was where she belonged. Good morning, Grace said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. Thank you for being here. Today I'm introducing the Gideon Foundation's newest endeavor, the Phoenix Rising Women's Centers. The screen behind her came alive with architectural concepts, data projections, and personal stories. These centers will offer business education, legal support, financial guidance, and mental health services for women rebuilding their lives, Grace said. Whether they are leaving abusive homes, recovering from financial harm, or choosing a fresh start, we will equip them to rise again. Margaret Chen, renowned powerhouse and sister to Victoria, the celebrated divorce attorney, spoke calmly. This initiative is deeply personal. Grace met her eyes without hesitation. It is. I spent 7 years in a relationship where I diminished myself. I believed love required sacrifice of identity. I had support and privilege waiting for me when I left. Most women don't. She advanced the slide. We'll launch 5 centers across 3 states. Initial funding is $50 million. In the first year, we anticipate serving 10,000 women. And the name, a board member asked. Phoenix Rising? Grace smiled. Because every woman deserves the chance to rise from what tried to destroy her. The power was always there. Sometimes it just needs to be remembered. Silence lingered briefly before Margaret began applauding. The rest of the board quickly followed. I move to approve, Margaret said. Seconded, several voices echoed. From the far end of the table, Richard caught Grace's eye and nodded, pride unmistakable. The motion carries, Grace announced. Phoenix Rising is officially underway. That evening, Grace stood at the empty lot designated for the first Phoenix Rising Center. Though vacant now, she could already envision the structure, the transformation, the women who would arrive shattered and leave restored. Her phone vibrated, a message from an unfamiliar number. She opened it. It was Daniel. I saw the announcement about your project. It's incredible. You're incredible. I'm sorry isn't enough, but I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve it. I finally understand what I lost. Grace read it twice, then erased it without replying. Some endings required no response. Another message appeared, this one from Julian. Was that him? Should I initiate the boat plan? Grace laughed and replied, No boats. I'm fine. You sure? The yacht's already booked. I'm sure. Stand down. All right, but the reservation stays. She slipped her phone away and watched the sky blaze in orange and violet as the sun disappeared. Somewhere, Daniel was living with his regrets. Somewhere else, Bianca was likely pursuing another illusion of security. Here, though, Grace was exactly where she was meant to be. She had always been a queen. She had simply misplaced her crown. Now she was home, and she would never dim herself again. 3 months later, Grace cut the ribbon at the grand opening of the first Phoenix Rising Center as cameras flashed and supporters cheered. Julian stood proudly beside her, Richard at her other side, her family gathered for the moment. After the ceremony, a young woman approached, tears falling freely. Miss Gideon, I wanted to thank you. I watched your interview, how you spoke about your marriage, about shrinking yourself for someone who didn't value you. That's my life, too. Seeing you here gave me the strength to leave. I started this training next week. Grace embraced her. What's your name? Sarah, she said softly. Sarah, you're going to do incredible things, Grace said. You've always had the strength. You just needed to remember it. As Sarah walked away, Julian leaned in. You realize you're basically a superhero now, right? Grace laughed. I just learned from my mistakes. No, her father said, joining them. You turned pain into purpose. That's rare. That's remarkable. That night, Grace walked through the estate's halls, lined with portraits of Gideon legacy and achievement. Generations of excellence watched silently. Soon, her portrait would join them, not as someone's wife, not as a background figure, but as Grace Gideon, vice president of Gideon Holdings, founder of Phoenix Rising, a woman who fell and rose stronger. She stopped before a mirror and studied her reflection. Steady, powerful, whole. Welcome home, she whispered. And for the first time in 7 years, she truly believed it. Grace reclaimed herself and built an empire rooted in empowerment. What did you think of her journey? Was it fulfilling? Share your thoughts below, and remember, you are never too lost to return to yourself. Never allow anyone to take your crown. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their strength. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story isn't finished. It's only beginning.